All right, so we're talking about not this one. This is not the right presentation. It should be this one. I said, I will be totally prepared and put up both of my presentations for today so I don't have to worry about something having to download or all that kind of stuff. And that's why we're doing this one first. So there's the first slide, the first official slide. We're going to be talking about how to go from one food truck to having a bunch of food trucks. And it's going to be involving a few different steps. So before we even get into the presentation, I want to explain this. And let me drive the sound people crazy with that one too. As a food truck owner, we juggle a lot of balls. Well, I thought I was really good at doing that so I could graduate to chainsaws. And well, that didn't work out well. So anyway, this is a repetitive motion injury from having done food service for like the last 100 years. So let's get into the presentation. My name is Bill Moore. If you didn't know that, hopefully you do. And if you don't, you do now. I've been a street food vendor since 1981, and I have had a number of different street food variations. I had hot dog carts, worked out of a tent for a while, had a food trailer, several food trailers. And there you see me dressed as Gilligan. One of the places that we did was in the Virgin Islands. We had a boat. We would take out 2 to 3 couples out on that boat, and then we did a little skit, cooked some dinner for them, just had a good time. Back then, as you can see, I was much skinnier and definitely dark-haired, and I played Gilligan. And I had a friend that was short and rotund, and he played the skipper. And there you see me as a pirate. That was when we had the hot dog cart. It was called Pirate Dogs. And we set up on the beach in Fort Walton Beach area, Destin, back when it was much easier to set up on the beach. And then there's me as I graduated. When we went into a food trailer, I thought, wow, I'll just look a little bit more like an admiral. And then there is our current food truck. My wife, Melissa, is working today and probably going to yell at me for not being there if she gets busy. So in the costume for that particular truck, I'm wearing it today. It's the old man costume. So that way that I can have a costume on. So I thought, well, I'll just wear it in Las Vegas too. I don't normally look like this. So let's get right into the presentation. Oh, no, we're going to talk more about me. I'm the Executive Director of the National Street Food Vendors Association. I have written 5 books about street food vending, and I have been a trainer for all those different companies that you see there. So I'm the kind of guy that would walk around, teach managers how to be managers and how to enforce all of their policies and procedures, and then I would be the one with a checklist going, you didn't do that, you didn't do that, you didn't do that. So I have lived and breathed food service since 1977. So I'm going to share a secret with you today. Before you can have 2 successful food trucks, you got to have 1 successful food truck. So today we're going to be talking about you guys, we're going to be talking about the truck you currently have, and we're going to be talking about the business and what is going to be changing as you move forward. When you go from 1 to 2, that's going to be the most difficult transition. And the reason it is because you're going to have to change. You can no longer be in 2 places at once. Because on the food truck right now, you probably feel like you're doing everything. But when you have 2 food trucks, you definitely cannot do everything. So some of you guys may be the chef. You may be the cook. You may be the expediter. Some of you guys may be the cashier. But no matter what is happening on the food truck, once you get that second one, you got to transition into being a business owner, which means you're going to be more of a public face. You're going to be talking to other business owners. You're going to be talking to getting the marketing done in a more broad sense, because now you got 2 locations. You got to keep them both busy. So you're going to change what you do. You become a leader instead of a producer. And that is a difficult transition. So what we're going to talk about in the first section is how do we help you to become a leader. Did you know that your personality directly impacts your food truck's success and or failure? I work with a bunch of people as far as helping them become food truck. No, it sounds like I've shorted out. In any case, I work with a lot of people to get them started in their food truck business. And I start them from the very beginning in a lot of cases. I'm actually helping somebody right now do the paperwork in Florida because they didn't feel confident enough to do it. So I had to train them on how to do the paperwork and then make sure that it gets done. But we do all those different steps. But the personality of every individual that I work with, I can usually tell if they're going to make it or not after I've talked with them 2 or 3 times. Because the personality that they have when they're talking to me is also the personality they have when they're talking to their guests. And sometimes that personality doesn't work out well. So if you don't know your personality type, you're going to end up leading by chance rather than it being a design or a plan. If you don't know your personality type, you may clash with your team because you don't know their personality types either. And you may have one way of leadership that has no impact on them because they don't understand how to communicate with you. You're going to struggle to adapt under pressure because you'll fall back to your personality. You're going to miss growth opportunities because you're thinking the way that you are now is going to be super successful. And you're going to risk burnout. You're going to risk burning out your crew as well. So here's a question for you. Do you know what the first lie detector test, Wonder Woman, and a personality profile have in common? And I know you know, so don't answer. They were all invented by the same person in 1928. His name was William Moulton Marston. He's a psychologist. And he had a lot of interest in how do people react and interact with each other under certain circumstances. So what we're talking about today is how do you interact and react to things happening in your business. So he developed a profile system called DISC, D-I-S-C, and it stands for, the D is dominance. As a leader, you're going to be dominant. We want stuff done now. Okay, but some of the employees may not respond to, oh, we want stuff done now, because that's not their personality. The second personality type is influence. There's somebody that's social. They're enthusiastic. They don't know a stranger. There's the social butterfly. Several of our children are social butterflies. We have steadiness being the next one. Steadiness, we're fading in and out. Steadiness is being patient, being supportive. I mean, you need employees just like that. And then you also have conscientiousness, which is a detail-oriented person, someone that likes processes and procedures, and they thrive on that. Most of us, on any given day, will go through all 4 of those. My personality profile, rather, is high D, high C. I like getting things done quickly. I live in seconds. I don't live in months. Like some people like to tell me, it'll take us months to do this. No, it won't. I'll find somebody else that can do it quicker. So I live in the high dominance, but I'm also very conscientious. I love spreadsheets. I love details. I can do detailed stuff that other people just think is so boring. I love it. I thrive on that. So that's my personality. You guys are probably going to be some mix of one of those 4 types. And depending on the situation, you may default to only one of those types. But you got to understand what your type is before you know who to hire and how to hire them based on their personalities. So you can imagine a cashier, you want them to be that high I personality. Somebody that's outgoing and wants to talk to people. That's your cashier. They won't do very well on a grill because they want to interact with people. And on the grill, they're interacting with the food. So that particular QR code that I have up there is going to take you to a custom chat GPT that I trained. It is specific on first developing or letting you understand what your personality profile is. And then it's going to help you develop a personal development plan so that you can improve yourself. So this is all free, and you guys will have complete access to that anytime you want. It is active now. And every time I take it, it shows me as high D, high C. That personal development plan is something that we had at many of the companies I work for. We always called it a PDP. It's going to help you identify and close any skill gaps. You don't know everything. I don't know everything. One of the books that I'm going to recommend you guys read is called Disney U. And I've followed Disney University for many, many years and still learn things about them. I actually, on the plane here, read about 3/4 of that book on that long flight. So you always are developing your skills. You're always learning new things. You will never know it all. As much as my wife will say, I act like I know it all, I do not. You want to stay adaptable in a changing market. We know that food service changes all the time. That's the only constant, is it changes all the time. You'll become a better leader for your team, and that's what's important. Because remember, when you have 2 food trucks, you can't be both places. So you're dependent upon the team doing the job that you need them to do, and the team relies on you being the leader to help them through those difficult situations. You want to it'll help you to set goals that will help you build momentum for your business. This is something that one of the very first companies I worked for, they had us do. And I have done it ever since. So we're talking early 1980s, I was doing this, and have been doing it ever since. What it does is it gives you a roadmap to help you become the best version of yourself. And that's all you really want. You're not in competition with any other food truck. You're not in competition with anybody else. You want to be the best version of yourself. So let's talk about the truck now. The truck has to be prepared for you to be off of it. If it's not prepared for you to be off of it, what you will have now is 2 chaotic trucks. First thing you want to have, and we'll talk about these individually. First thing you want to have is standards. Standards define things. So think of standards as being numbers. There are going to be times, there are going to be measurements, there are going to be weights, there are going to be specific and very vivid descriptions with understandable information for people to be able to look at. Okay, we're going to make a burger. I love burgers. I've eaten several of them here because I just can't pass up a really good burger. So how much does that hamburger weigh? How do you handle the bun? Is it toasted? Is it not toasted? Is it steamed? What specifics go with that? Does it have mayonnaise, lettuce, tomato, ketchup, pickle, onion, mustard? How much of each of those does it have on it? How thick is the onion cut? How thick is the tomato cut? So standards let every employee know what your expectation is. So from standards, we go into policies. Policies are just predetermined decisions. We all hate hearing it's company policy. We all hate it, but it is company policy. You're defining what those policies are. And a policy explains what happens if one of those standards isn't met. So you have the standard that every burger has to cook for 4 minutes. And then you have to temp the burger, and it should be 155 for 15 seconds. Okay, if it's not at that temperature, what happens? What do? The employee has to know what that policy is if the burger doesn't meet the standard. What happens if they don't put the mayonnaise on it? They need to understand how to handle that remake. So the policy is covering everything. And it's not only just the food, it's also going to be what happens if they're late? Are they late at 5 minutes? Are they late at 1 minute after their scheduled time? How do they call off work? Because again, you're not on the food truck, so somebody's got to be there to run it. So how do they call off? Do they call you? Do they call the person in charge of the truck? How many hours notification do they give? Is it 1 hour, 3 hours? It's the day before. So all of those policies help the employees know what their boundaries are. Just like the toddler, as they're walking around trying to do stuff and you're hollering, no, 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 they're learning where the boundary is from the no, no, no. We don't want to have to yell no, no, no all the time on the food truck. We want them to be able to read the policy, know what it is, and then follow it. Policies deal with people, and the policies start to define your culture. Policies don't have to be mean. You will be terminated if you're 1 minute late. You go through the steps to help them improve, because that's your goal. You've already spent money to train them and hire them, so we want them to improve. There'll be some point, perhaps, that some people you do have to terminate and let go, but the initial goal should be to help them improve and get better. Just like you're on a personal development program for you to get better, you want them to get better too. Next one is procedures. This is the official and the correct way to do things. So if we had a flat top grill up here, and I said, everybody that's got experience cooking a burger, come up here and cook one for me. If there's 35, 40, 50 people in here that have that experience, I would guarantee you there'd be 35 or 40 different ways to cook the burger. Just because you hire somebody that says, hey, I worked at Wendy's to go cook your grill and run your grill doesn't mean that they're going to run it the way you want it to be ran. I worked at Wendy's, worked at Hardee's, worked at Burger King. They're all different. We all sold hamburgers. They're all prepared different. But I did never once say, we did it this way at Wendy's, let's do that here as well. So again, a procedure explains all the details required to achieve the standard and then to comply with any policy. Standards and policies are explained and or supported by procedures. If you've worked in a restaurant company, you've probably heard about the ops manual. The ops manual is just a big book of procedures. Systems is a fixed set of rules. Systems help you to check, make sure people are following the standards and policies and procedures. It organizes a task so that it's duplicatable. So if you ask somebody to go clean the restroom, for example, we would have 35 or 50 or however many people's in here, 100, doing the restroom differently. Some people may start with the toilet, some people may sweep the floor, some people may stock the soap and the paper towels. When you have a system, you're explaining this is step one. The first thing you do is, step two is what you do, and then it's just a list for them to go by. So it becomes duplicatable. The neat thing about duplication of a system is the more you do it, the faster you get. One of the stories that I share with people, when I very first started working in restaurants, I was just barely 18 years old, and being 18 makes you also dumb and arrogant. So I go to work in Rack's restaurants, we're going to talk about them in a second, and they sold roast beef. So it's like Arby's. We sold roast beef, and we sliced roast beef as it was ordered. We put it on a little steamer, toasted the bun, wrap it up, send it out. And that was a sandwich, and that was our signature item. We sold more of those than anything else. So everybody wanted to work that station because you were busy. It would make time go by quicker. I thought I was awesome. Till one Friday night, we have lines everywhere. We had multiple registers up front, so there's lines at every register. We have a drive-through that's wrapped around the building. And the manager comes up to me and says, Bill, I need you to go out and sweep the parking lot. And I'm like, well, there's people. No, parking lot's more important. So he sends me out to sweep the parking lot and replaces me with, now remember, I'm 18 years old, arrogant and stupid, replaces me with a girl. So now my ego is totally crushed, and I go out and sweep the parking lot. It did not need to be swept. A few cigarette butts, a couple of wadded up pieces of paper, and that was it. So I go back in. It's okay, Mr. Colton, I'm ready to get back on my station. No, why don't you go do the ham station, which was the station nobody wanted because nobody ordered ham sandwiches. That's when I learned that I was not fast. So I had a choice. I could either get faster or find another job. So Bill got faster. I got really, really fast. And of course, I'm paying for it now at 66 years old because everything for me is measured in seconds. And of course, you have to have a person in charge, a PIC, somebody that is in charge when you are not there. You don't want one group of employees to think, well, because Bill's not there, we're all in charge. No, one person's in charge. And the other employees have to understand they are subordinate to what that person says. And if you have policies and procedures in place, then they all know what they are. So somebody that says, hey, I want you to do this, it has to follow those policies and procedures that are already written. So the person in charge basically is your voice, but that voice is supported by the systems and the policies and procedures and standards. And they need a personal development plan too. So somebody that you're going to put in charge of the food truck, they have to enforce all the policies, procedures, and standards and systems, as well as the KPIs. That's the key performance indicators. At the very minimum, they should be worried about speed of service. They should be worried about sales revenue coming in and how to grow that. And they should have goals. You know, today we're going to be set up and we're going to do $1,000. That's our sales goal today. How are you going to make sure that we hit $1,000? And they should understand what they can and can't do to help increase those sales. And again, they need their own personal development program. The sound person's going to kill me because I hear all kinds of noise up here. Anyway, that's me back when I was young. Now, me as a stupid, again, arrogant teenager, the company I worked for, Rack's Restaurants, had a policy that you had to be 21 years old before you could become a manager. Just an arbitrary number. Not that you had to know X, Y, and Z. It's you got to be 21 years old. Well, why? So I thought, I will contact the company. So I decided I'm going to write a letter. Wrote a letter to the corporate office in Columbus, Ohio of Rack's Restaurants. I borrowed an electric typewriter because we're talking this is in the late 70s, early 80s, so I borrowed a typewriter. And it was for my girlfriend, and her mother had paid for the little cursive ball. So instead of having the little square letters, it had the cursive writing on it. So, oh, that's fancy. I'll send them a letter in cursive. So I typed out a letter, and it was essentially a list of, this is what I know how to do, and I should be a manager because of this list of things I know how to do. Not a one of them had to do with leadership. I know how much money goes in the store bank. Okay, well, big deal. That took you 1 second to learn. I know how to count a drawer down. Okay, that took you a minute to learn. I talked about the weights of the sandwiches. I talked about a whole list of things that were standards, but not a one on how to lead people. So I sent that letter to Ed Arndt. He was the president of the company at the time. Ed Arndt jumped in his company car. It was a Buick Regal, so we all knew if it was a Buick Regal that came on the parking lot, it's probably somebody from the home office or one of the executives. And he drove 2 hours from Columbus, Ohio to where I was working in Ashland, Kentucky. It's a little over a 2-hour drive. So the story, I'm working night shift. Having an executive come in to a restaurant at night is really unheard of. They all talk about everybody has to go in, once a month, once a week, whatever. They don't. They'll wave a wand and say, well, I was there for a minute, and call that their official nighttime visit. But they don't visit frequently. And the management knew that. Back then, we had a whole bunch of employees, and the managers actually managed. So they would sit, and this particular gentleman's name was Nick Colton. He would go out and sit in the dining room, put a whole bunch of papers around him, make it look like he was working hard, and he would just sit there. Now remember, there's no cell phones. He can't go scrolling through the cell phone. We didn't even have cordless phones back then, so he couldn't take the phone from the office out with him, so he just sat out there with a bunch of papers, acting like he was working. In comes that Buick Regal, and we all saw it because we all were trained. If you see a Buick Regal, it's probably somebody from the home office. He jumps up, he runs back, and he's panicking because he recognized Ed Arndt. So he's panicking, oh my God, we got to fix this. And there really wasn't anything wrong, but he was panicked. And he says, you got a guy working tonight named Bill Moore? And he says, yes, we do. Where is he? So Nick comes out of the office, and he looks like the ghost of Christmas past. He's right there. And he goes over to me and says, glad to meet you. We need to talk. And he pulls me off the line, and he's walking me out. He goes, Nick, take over the slicer. And that was unheard of. So you have the president of the company telling the manager that's in charge to go run the meat slicer. Again, the most predominant position. So we go out and sit and talk in the dining room for 3 hours. He interviewed me as if I was prepared. I was not prepared. Not even close. So he gets up after the interview, and he goes, oh yeah, young man, you got me in trouble. And I'm like, oh, how did I get you in trouble? He said, that letter, my secretary opened it up. She brought it in to me and says, you need to read this, but before you read it, I want you to buy me the same kind of typewriter that he's using. So fine. Got you in trouble. The neat thing about that, though, is there's me as Gilligan again. I told you I was in the Virgin Islands. I'm in the 5th highest volume Wendy's in the world. So when you're in the Virgin Islands running a corporate restaurant, everybody makes an excuse to go visit that corporate restaurant. Because, hey, we can go to St. Thomas and say it's a business trip, spend 5 seconds in the restaurant, and then spend 2 weeks out on the beaches. And that's what they would do. We had a whole bunch of people come see us in St. Thomas. I got to meet Dave Thomas because I was working at Wendy's at the time. Got to meet Dave Thomas. And he wrote a book called Dave's Way. Now, this long passage is about Ed Arndt. I left Rax when the company sold all the stores in Florida. They had moved me to Florida, and they sold, and I said, well, I don't want to move back to Kentucky and be a hillbilly anymore. I would rather stay in Florida. So I went to Wendy's. Ed Arndt also left Rax to go to Wendy's. And the other person mentioned in this passage also left Rax to go to Wendy's. They used to say that Rax Restaurants was Wendy's test kitchen. We had baked potatoes at Rax Restaurant a full year before Wendy's did. But this little passage, Dave Thomas is talking about Ed Arndt in his book. And the detail here, he's talking about Ed walks into the restaurant and he hears a noise. and it's a popping and crackling, and you're all familiar with it if you have an existing food truck and you sell something that's deep fried. You put it into the fryer and the oil goes crazy. There's popping and cracking, a little bit of bubbling, like a witch's cauldron. He heard that. Now the policy at Wendy's was we don't want that to happen. So we would slack the french fries. And what that means is you would take that case of frozen french fries, put them on a shelf, and we had one shelf designated for this that would hold like 6 cases of fries. And each bag was laid so they could thaw out. The goal was there would be no ice crystals. So when you open up the bag and pour it into the fryer, it doesn't pop and fizzle and make all that kind of noise. The neat thing about that, it also allows you to run the fryer at a lower temperature so you can extend the life of the shortening. But Ed Arndt heard that when he walked in the door. Now, I know this is a true story because Gary, his name actually is Gary Bell, he used to say that I had worked for Rack's Restaurants ever since Jesus was a baby. And I told him that's not true. I hired Jesus to build some of our chairs in the restaurant. But anyway, you want to have that kind of detail, and you want to pass that kind of detail on to your subordinates. Obviously, Dave Thomas would have recognized that sound, but he was happy his subordinate recognized the sound. Let's talk about the business. I don't even know what time it is, because the one thing you'll learn about me is I can't shut up. Okay, so moral, legal, ethical. We're talking about foundational principles. You want to have these in your business because this is what's going to allow the business to move forward beyond just the marketing that you're going to do when you have that second and third and 10th food truck. So let's talk about moral, legal, ethical. Part of the National Street Food Vendors Association is we want everything that we do to be based on either morality, legality, or ethical. So morals guide human behavior. So when you go to interview somebody, you're going to learn about their morals just by the questions that you ask them. I can't step too far away. So you want to know the morals. What do they have? Because that creates a clash if their morals are different than yours. The same with ethics. Ethics is, okay, we're cooking a burger, and oh, it fell on the floor. Okay, most people are going to pick it up and may joke about 5-second rule, but they'll throw it away. But there are people, and I saw this on the plane that I flew on, fell on the floor, they picked it up and put it back so they could serve it. What I saw on the plane that I flew on is they were stocking the ice. Okay, one little ice cube fell onto the floor and the stewardess picked it up and threw it in the bin with the rest of the ice. Didn't even make a joke about 5-second rule. So that's an ethical dilemma. They know they weren't supposed to do that, but they did it anyway. And of course, none of us that saw it got drinks with ice. Second thing you're going to work on is development. And it's not just your development, it's your employees' development. Employees that have a clear growth path, they're going to work smarter, they're going to be more motivated to stay with your business. Now, you know I've only done food service. So we're talking, this is 48th year of doing food. I've had people that come up to me, especially when I was at Burger King too, Wendy's and Burger King, and we would be talking about growth. And they would say, well, you're still just selling French fries. Well, yeah, I am, but I got to work in the Virgin Islands. I got paid to work in the Virgin Islands. They paid to move me. I went from one Wendy's in Ocala, Florida to St. Thomas. When did your company pay you to go to the Virgin Islands? Not only did they pay me a salary, they paid for the apartment that I lived in, and they gave me a car to drive around the island. And you know why they did that? Because Bill had the humble personality to, every time someone came in and said, I would like a Wendy's single, I'd say, would you like fries with that? Would you like a Frosty with that? I followed the policies and procedures and got rewarded for it. Your employees need to have the same thing, because you never know when one of those is going to end up being Dave Thomas. Dave Thomas started as a cook when he was in his early teens. You just never know. So I'm going to develop all my employees. And yes, they may go work for somebody else. They may own their own food truck. You know what? Have at it. Just like the little cartoon in Cars where he's talking about, yeah, I trained you on everything you know, but I didn't train you on everything I know. So I don't mind training people. I want them to be the best they can possibly be, and I love when they do things beyond my training. Because if they're able to take my training and expand, well then I got to get better. I like that challenge. Systems again, act as your voice when you're not on the food truck. And every single employee needs to understand those systems and understand there's consequences, again a policy, if they don't follow those systems. Effective systems increase productivity. And you're always going to be tweaking those systems. I don't know if it's a good habit or bad habit, but I will stand at the end of the food truck and just look. What can I do to improve what we're doing? And we make tweaks all the time. She does on her station, I do on mine. It's just part of the growth process. We think we can save one more second, and we will. Contingencies. So we're going to be Batman in this particular instance. We're going to have a contingency for everything. Contingencies help you to think through when there's problems. We have a contingency right now today on our booth. We had a bunch of stuff we're going to give away. So you got to come check our booth out. Problem is, some of the stuff got lost in transit. So, oh crap, what are we going to do? I sell books. I showed you 4 of the books that I've written. I've written 5 total. And I had a bunch of books that were going to be here. They aren't going to make it till Friday. So I got to figure out a way to generate some revenue by selling books. But how am I going to do that when I don't have a physical book for you to look at? So we all deal with those kind of problems. So you have to have that contingency. What would happen if? Some people like to call it worrying. It's not worrying. What would happen if? And then how would I respond to that if? When you have more food trucks, that means you have more scheduling, more inventory, more staff, and you got a whole lot more events to juggle, and hopefully you don't end up like this. Forecasting helps you to cover unexpected expenses. For example, you're going to go to an event. We're going to do $10,000 this weekend. So you know how much food to buy. At least I hope you do. If you have run a 25% food cost, then you're going to buy $2,500 worth of food. You don't buy $5,000 worth of food because you're not going to sell it all if you only do $10,000. And if you do sell it all, that means you run a 50% food cost. You don't want to do that. So forecasting makes you think about your future expenditures. And then the next logical step was, if those expenditures are too large, what do I do? Got to have money in the bank. Got to have money as a backup. So you're going to build systems for training, build systems for ordering, build systems for marketing. Because you don't want to be the one doing all the ordering, especially when you get 8, 10, 12 food trucks. You won't have time to go inventory all the food to know how much to order, so you're going to have to teach someone else. And then they've got to understand the responsibilities. Again, it comes back to, if you're going to do, just for the sake of easiness, $10,000 a week, you want to run a 25% food cost, the most amount of food you should order would be $2,500. But you're not going to order $2,500 because you got food sitting on the food truck. You can't place a food order from your home office. Just can't do it. You will either over order, which means you got food that potentially could go bad, or you're going to under order, which means you're going to run out of food and leave money on the table. Bill don't like leaving money on the table. Accountability, key performance indicators, KPIs. If you're not on the food truck, the people that are on the food truck have to be responsible for easy things like speed of service. Super easy to gauge speed of service. Most modern POS systems will do speed of service. Food truck leaders have to be held accountable for the results. Because remember, you're not there. So they're the ones that are in real time going, I got to make a decision about, do I send this employee home and save a little bit of labor, or do I just sit here and not care? So now we got 3 people not being productive when we could send 1 home a little bit early. And I know that's really, really tough, especially if you've not worked in a food service environment. But I promise, if you say, hey guys, it's a little slow today, who wants to go home early? Your whole staff is going to raise their hand. They all want to go home early. And that's okay. It doesn't mean they hate the job. It's just they can think of better things to do than cooking burgers or being on a hot food truck. And then you just decide who gets to go home early. And then the next day, if it's still a little bit slow, somebody else can go home a little early. Decisions that you make in your food business. If you learn nothing else today, every decision that you do on your food truck, whether you have one or you have a bunch, will the result of this decision improve my sales or improve my profits? You want to get a yes to both of those. If you cannot improve sales and cannot improve profits, why are you doing it? It's real simple. I learned that from Rack's Restaurants way back when, because we had a meeting where we weren't doing what we needed to be doing as far as sales, and they said everything you do at the store level, it either needs to increase sales or improve profits. If it can't do both, we don't need to be doing it right now. Thank you, guys. Come visit me in booth 505. I will be there after I do the campfire session all day long. And I would love for you guys to come sit and chat with me. And look, I finished on time. Thank you all so much.